In this tutorial, we're going to build a full GDPR plugin. In this tutorial, I want to build a full GDPR plugin. And this is going to be a long video, and if you're not familiar with GDPR, GDPR is basically the general protection of the personal information that you collect from a user on a website. And the information basically that we're going to do is just saying we use cookies to make your experience better on this website. But I want to go through the full GDPR plugin with you guys, and that is what to do on the plugin activation, which will be checking for a table. If the table doesn't exist, we're going to create the table from within the code. We're going to save the user's information into that table whenever they click it. And it's not going to be anything user information as far as their phone number and their first name and last name and their address and all that stuff. It'll basically be their IP address. And then we'll set a cookie for their browser that will say they've hit the OK button, so it doesn't show up on their screen every time they load a page. And so we'll be building that part. We'll build out the HTML and the CSS and even the settings page. It's going to be a really long video and a long plugin to build, but it's going to give you a great understanding of how to build plugins, how to do activation hooks, how to create tables in the database, which typically I would say don't build tables in a database, because if you don't know how to index the tables correctly, it could really slow down the page, the loading of the site. But in this, we're going to build the database table, and I'll show you guys what columns to index. And then we'll even build a page that displays all the users that have, or the IP addresses that have clicked on OK for the GDPR, and it'll have the date, their IP address, and it's pretty much it. But let's get started on building this plugin, and I'll walk through each step with you guys. Again, this is going to be a long plugin, but I will put in the chapters links in the description so that you guys can jump to different chapters. If it's something that you already know, you can go to the next chapter or follow along through the description to see what you need to do on your side, and you can go back and click on those links. So let's get started. All right, so here we're on the ideapro.io site that we use for testing and examples like this. And we're using the 2021 default WordPress theme here. And I want to keep this theme on here because I want to show you that this GDPR plugin will work with any theme that you use, because we're going to be building it in the plugin and not the actual theme. And so here on this other tab, we're logged into the ideapro.io WordPress admin. So I can show you on the appearance that we're using the 2021 default theme here. Plugins, we have no plugins installed on this site whatsoever. So other than we have one must-use plugin. That was an example that we did before in a different video. So we have no plugins here, so we're going to jump into our code and we're going to start creating that plugin. So if you guys have watched my previous videos, you'll know that I use Sublime Text Editor 3 for most of my coding. I had someone comment that said, why don't you use VS Code? I've tried VS Code in the past and was okay. I didn't like it. I try to stay away from using stuff that's built by companies like Microsoft. You just about have to with computer, unless you're using a Linux. So I use an Apple computer, a Mac, and I have been using Sublime Text 3 for years. I've recently switched to VS Code because I was like, oh, someone commented I should try it out again. And I've had it installed on the computer for a long time, and I deleted it and reinstalled a new version just to make sure it was updated. And I really like VS Code. This is the newest VS Code and stuff. Really, it's basically Sublime with things fixed that didn't work right on Sublime. So I really like it. I'm going to do a video about that eventually that shows how I set up Sublime and set up VS Code and the plugins that I use. but I'm not going to do that in this video. So I just wanted to let you guys know that I am using VS Code because I do like it now much better than I thought I would. All right. So here is the folder structure for our current site. We have the public HTML and the WP content. And then inside here we have plugins and themes. So to create a plugin on a website, we create a file in the plugins folder. Now, a file is good enough to create a plugin. One file is all you need. So if we did a file, if we did a new file here and we called this, I'm going to do Idea Pro GDPR 2022, just for the fun of it. Actually, that needs to be a rename. It needs to be a .php file. .php, save. There we go. Okay, so now if we go in here and we put in our PHP code for the header of our plugin, these are just comments, and we're going to say plugin name is GDPR plugin. All right, and we save that. We come back over to our plugins in the WordPress admin here and we refresh our page. WordPress now sees this as a full-on WordPress plugin, and all it is one page. So if you're building a very small plugin that's just a function, it can be just a single page. It doesn't have to be a folder with all this, all this stuff in it. It can be just a single page. But we're not going to do that. We want to delete this, delete, and we'll delete it from this side, delete, if it'll let us. Oh, it did. Okay. So we're going to create a full-on plugin. So we want a folder, and that folder is going to be Idea Pro GDPR plugin. All right. And so then inside of that folder, we're going to create a file, and that file could be Idea Pro, or it should be Idea Pro GDPR plugin.php. All right. So now at the top here, we're going to open up our PHP brackets, and we're going to do some comments, and we're going to say plugin name is Idea Pro GDPR plugin. We're going to do a description, and that description is provide a GDPR function to our website. There we go. All right, and then so we can put in the version, which we should. We're just going to put 1.0. Doesn't really matter what you start your version number at. I would start it at 1.0 or 0.1 or whatever you want to start it at. We're just going to say version 1.0. And anytime we make an update to this, we're going to change that version number. And I'm not going to do in this video, but you should use something like Git to save that plugin so that if something ever happens, you can go back to a different version, go back to a version that you know was working if something goes wrong. All right. So we're going to put in the author, and we're just going to say Idea Pro LLC, and we're going to say author URI, and we're just going to put in HTTPS ideapro.com, and you could put in license information and stuff like that. That's all we're going to put in here for right now. So we're going to save that. We're going to come over here and we're going to refresh the page, and we're going to say activate. Of course, now that plugin is activated, but it doesn't do anything because we don't have it. We didn't tell it to do anything. All right. So now we're going to start building out some of the structure of our plugin and the things that we need for it. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to come up here to our folder, and we're going to create a new folder, and that folder is going to be called HTML. All right. And so then we're going to come up here and we're going to create another new folder, and that folder is going to be called functions. All right. I like to do kind of separate those out. You can folder structure, you can do whatever you want, but you got to kind of keep it kind of standard. All right. So we've got a functions folder and we've got an HTML folder. We are going to be putting some functions in here, very few. but we have those in here. All right. So inside of this HTML folder, we're going to create a new folder called CSS. And inside of the HTML folder, we're also going to create a folder called JS. And that's kind of our folder structure for right now. All right. So now what we need to do is we need to build a function that on activation hook, it checks to see if there's a table on the database. All right. So we're going to come right here and we're going to say function, and we're going to call this the IdeaPro GDPR activation hook. Okay. And you can call that function anything that you want. Definitely keep it something with like your name as the first of the plugin name so that it's different than anything else on your entire website. It doesn't conflict with any other functions in the entire site. All right, so that's the name we're going to use. Right down here, we're going to come in and we're going to say register activation hook. And we're going to make sure I spelled that right, register activation hook. Okay, that's right. So then this first argument here is going to be the actual file that we're on now. So we're just going to say file. And then the second argument is going to be the callback, which is the function that we created here. So we're going to put that here in the second argument there. Now this will fire on activation only. So if we were to save this, go back over here and try to find, go to the database and try to find our table once we create it, it's not going to be there. So once we get the table built, the code for the table, we're going to have to deactivate this plugin and reactivate it so that it creates that table. Once the entire thing's built and you put that plugin on a new website and you activate it, it will automatically create that table. All right. So since we already have ours activated, we're going to have to deactivate it and reactivate it once we get our table plugin or table information in there. All right. So inside of the plugin here, we're going to make a little comment. Let's say check for table in the database. All right. So that's what this next following code is going to do. All right. First, we're going to create a table name. Let's go back up here and name of the table. And you don't have to put this comment in there. I just want to make sure that we have it. So the name of the table is going to be GDPR. There we go. GDPR. Let's just leave it GDPR. Now, if we named our table just GDPR, we wouldn't have the WP underscore and stuff included, the prefix to the table like WordPress does. You can create your table whatever name you want to create it, but I would advise to use the same prefix for that your WordPress is. And that's important because if you have a multi-site WordPress installation, which is a big thing to do. If you have 5 websites under the same database in a multi-site WordPress site, and you just name your table whatever you want, just a name, any site in that WordPress is going to have trouble accessing that same table. They will, but if you want it to be different for each WordPress site, you need to use the prefix for that WordPress installation. If you've ever worked with a multi-site, multi-sites have, WP1 underscore and the thing, and then WP2 and underscore, or whatever you name those tables in the installation. So you want to use the prefix of the WordPress site that you're working with. To do that, we're going to come up here and we're going to call in the global, if I spell it right, global WordPress DB. All right. So then here, to get the table name, we can use WordPress DB prefix dot, and then which is typically WP underscore. So ours would be WP underscore GDPR. That pulls in the prefix name that is in your WP config file. All right. So our table name is going to be WP underscore GDPR, or whatever that prefix is. All right, so now here we need to check for that table in the database. So check table is equal to, and again, we're going to use this WordPress DB, and we're going to say get results. And I've done queries before, or a video on queries, WordPress database queries, and there's different ones you can use. You can use get row, insert, get results. There's multiple ones. I like to use get results because it's kind of a standard query that you can do just about anything with it. All right, so we're going to put a couple of double quotes in here, and we're going to say show tables like, and then we're going to call in our table here. Why did I do that? All right, and we're going to say table. Basically what that's doing is it's going to say show tables like, and it's going to try to find that table. We could say show tables where table name is equal to, but this is pretty quick and easy to do it like this. Now what we're going to do is we're not going to display this or anything else because we don't care. If the number of tables that returns is greater than or equal to 1, then that table already exists. If the results equal 0, then we need to create that table, and that's what we're looking for. So we're going to say if, so we're going to look, let's make a comment right here that says count the number of tables that are returned by check table. All right, so if count check table is equal to 0, we're going to run this code. All right, so then end of check table count. I like to sometimes put a comment at the end of the if statement. That way, if I have a bunch of different if statements and while loops and for eaches and stuff, I know what this closing bracket is. All right, so now inside of here, if that table doesn't exist, we're going to create the table. Let's start out here. We're going to say create table is equal to, and we're going to use the same WordPress DB get results. Even though it says get results, we're using it to insert information into the database, which is perfectly fine. So we're going to say create table, and then we're going to open up some double quotes here to get our, and we're going to say table. And so we're creating that table up here, which is the table name that we chose, the prefix and the GDPR. So we're going to create table, and then we're going to open up some parentheses. All right, so then inside of these parentheses, we're going to lay out the columns that we want in the table. So the first column that we want is an ID, and that is just the ID of that row in the table. And that's going to be an auto increment, so that, and it really doesn't matter about anything other than it's just going to be the to increment the number of rows that we have. And that's going to be an integer, and it's going to be 11 characters long, or 11 numbers long. So, and that should cover a huge majority of the numbers you get. If not, you can change it to 20, or which is a big int or whatever. But we're going to leave an int 11 here, which is an integer, and we're going to unsign it. Unsigned. Okay. Auto increment and primary and key. Okay, so what that does is it says the ID is unique, unsigned, auto increment, primary, and that way you have one column that is unique in the database, right? Okay, so the next one is going to be the, let's do IP address. So IP address, let's do IP underscore address, varchar, and that's going to be 32. and we're going to set that as null. The reason why I made it 32 is because typically an IP address is, 4 blocks of 3 at the max characters, and then you have the period in between each one. But some of the results that we're going to get returned, because we're not going to try to make sure it's the IPv4 address, some of the items that we're going to be returned is an IPv6 address, which is 32 characters long. So this field will hold anything up to 32 characters long. And I think that's going to be the best way to do it. All right. So the next one that we're going to do is we got IP address, date. Let's do the user number or user ID. How about that? User ID, and that's going to be int 11. Let's set a default as 0. What that's going to do is we're going to look and see if that user is logged in. And if they're logged in and they click GDPR, let's capture who they are as a logged in user. If they're not logged in, it's going to just put them as 0, which is no user in the database at all. All right, and the next one is going to be date. So this, we could use, the date, the timestamp, or we could use our own date, or we could use both. So let's do date varchar. All right, let's say this is going to be our date format is going to be year, day, or month. Let's do month, day, space, hour, minute, seconds. That's it. All right. So then we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 characters. So 19. It's kind of a bad way to do that, I guess, right? So varchar 19, and we're going to set it to null. Okay. And then what parts do we want indexed? We don't really want to index any of this. We're not going to be searching for any of it right now. We could, if we wanted to, we could do index, and then this is going to be the columns. The first one, ID, we've already set that as an index. We could use their IP address, but I really don't want to. Let's do user ID as an index. If we had another one, let's say we wanted to do IP address, we could do IP address like that, but we're not going to worry about that. If you wanted to search those users by IP address, you would want to index the IP address. If you wanted to search by user ID, of course, you need to make the user ID indexable, and which is what we're doing here. So we're just going to make the user ID indexable for now. And we could do another date column called reg date, and we could use that as a timestamp. Okay, so we're going to save that. And now what's going to happen is it's going to create this table on activation hook. So if you look at our database table names, this is the what I was talking about as far as the prefix, the idea pro io underscore, and then all the table names that WordPress creates. So we changed it from WP underscore to idea pro io underscore. And this is the simplest one that we use. Typically we create a very unique prefix name, but I like to keep on this one very simple so that in tutorials like this we can show it and it doesn't have some weird characters and stuff like that. So if you see, there's no table in here called GDPR right now as far as the our table name here. So we're going to be looking for GDPR after we do the activation of the plugin. All right, so that's not over here right now. So we need to make sure we save our plugin. All right, it's uploaded. So we're going to come over here to plugins, and we're going to deactivate, and we are going to activate the plugin, and we got no errors. All right, so now if we come over here and we refresh there is our GDPR table. And if you look at the structure, we have ID, IP address, user ID, date, and registration date, which is a timestamp. All right. So now we have our table in there, and now we can save the user's information into that table as we go. All right, so that is now created. Now, you can create a deactivation hook that removes the GDPR table when you deactivate the plugin. And if you're going to make this for other people, I would recommend building it to do that. You don't have to, but if they deactivate the plugin for maybe they're checking to see what's going on with their website, something's went wrong, and they think maybe that the GDPR plugin is the problem, and they deactivate that plugin, it removes the table and all the data. So a lot of plugins don't do that. If you deactivate most plugins that you get, the table information is still there. That way, when you reactivate the plugin, all of that data is still there. You didn't lose anything. So typically I wouldn't remove the table on a deactivation hook, but you can if you want to. So, or you can make it where it says, whenever someone deactivates, that it says, hey, do you want to remove the information from the table? Remove the table and the information. They can say yes and remove it. But we're not going to go into that in this plugin. This video is going to be long enough as it is. All right, so now we've got our table created, and in this page here, that's pretty much going to be the only function that exists on this page. Everything else is going to be in sub pages so that we can keep everything organized. All right. So right up here at the top, we're going to say require once, and we're going to say functions, and this function is going to be our CSS functions. So we're going to say css.php, and we're going to save that. We're going to come over here to functions, and we're going to create a new file that is called css.php. All right, and we're going to save that so that we have no errors on our website in the front end. All right, so we're going to open up some PHP brackets, and we need a couple of different functions. We're going to need a couple of different CSS files. We're going to need a front end CSS file for the look and feel of the GDPR box that pops up, and then we're going to need some CSS for the backend that we're going to be building for our settings. All right, so we're going to create a function called backend. Let's do IdeaPro backend CSS. All right, and so that's going to be an add action, and that's going to be an admin head. All right, and then our callback function, which is this. All right, and then inside of here we can put in a CSS file, which we are going to do here in just a minute. All right, so the next one we're going to do is we're going to create a function for IdeaPro front end CSS. Whoops. And that's going to be under here. We're going to do an add action, and that's going to be a WP head, and then our callback function, which is this. Okay. All right. So in there, we're going to enqueue some CSS so that we have the CSS for the front end. All right. So this back end, we're going to use it no matter what. So we're going to just include a file. All right. So in here we can say plugin directory path dot, and then I don't know why, parentheses dot, and in here we're going to say dir, which is going to take us back to, dir, which is going to take us back to the GDPR plugin directory here. And then inside of here, we're going to say HTML and CSS and backend.css. All right. So then in our CSS here, we're going to create a new file, and that new file is going to be called backend.css. All right, save that. All right, so now we're including that. So before we include it, we need to echo out some style tags. Oops, style, there we go. And we'll put an echo style here. There's a lot of different ways you can do this. I'm doing it, try to do it as simple as possible so you guys can understand how it works, and then we can go from there. All right, so in this backend CSS, we're going to be using, we're just going to say Idea Pro color, right? Whatever. Background color is equal to white. All right, and we're going to save that. Now, the only reason why I'm doing that is because I want to come over here, I want to refresh the page. Let's look at the view source and look for the CSS that we did to make sure that it's coming through. And so right here it is, style, Idea Pro color, background color, and then that closes off the style there. Now, you could link a CSS file like they do here, but we're not going to worry about that. We're just going to put it as inline style here. So now we know that is working. We can close that. We can go back over here and we can remove this because it's going to have different stuff in this CSS file. All right. So now the front end CSS, we need to enqueue a CSS file for the front end information. So here for the front end, we're going to enqueue the style sheet. So we need to do WP_enqueue. Am I spelling that right? E-N-Q-U-E-U-E. Yeah. Style. We're going to open up some brackets here. And this first argument is going to be our style name. So we're going to say Idea Pro front end GDPR CSS. Let's not call it CSS. Let's just do that. Idea Pro front end GDPR, and then the second column is going to be where that file is. And so we're going to call it. We're going to say plugin directory URL and __dir __, and then dot and slash HTML slash CSS slash, and we can call it GDPR style.css, right? And so we need to create that style here as a file, and we're going to say GDPR style.css. Okay, so, and save that. So what this does here, this name here, is basically we're giving it a name, and that's going to be the ID that if someone wants to from a different function on a different plugin or on their theme, they can write a function that removes that CSS from the code. All right, so we're going to do that. Let's go to GDPR style and let's say dot GDPR container background color is going to be white, right? So we save that and we come over to the front end of our website. We refresh. If we view the page source, there we go. All right, so here it is here. So it links style sheet, Idea Pro front end GDPR CSS. Now, if you notice, we named it this, and WordPress automatically adds it as a -CSS. That's the reason why I started to put in -CSS and I took it out, because then it would say -CSS -CSS. So if you're going to remove this from the front end in a different function, you would just need to use this as the ID, not with the -CSS. I've done a video on that. You can see, you can search for a video, or I'll put it up in the cards here. So, but here now we have HTTPS, ideapro.io, WP content plugins, Idea Pro GDPR plugins, HTML, CSS. So here you can see we got 2 double slashes. So what we need to do is we need to take out the slash in front of that HTML and come over here and refresh. And where did it go? Control F. There it is. It just changed, put it on a different line. So now we have style sheet, Idea Pro, GDPR. So now we have WP content plugins, Idea Pro GDPR plugin / HTML / CSS GDPR style, and then version equals 5.9. Now WordPress automatically puts the version equals 5.9. That's the version of WordPress. So when WordPress updates, your CSS is refreshed by cache and stuff like that because of that version number after it. All right. So if we click on this file, it will open up and say what the GDPR is. If we click on this file and it doesn't open, that means the URL structure that you've used is not correct, and you need to fix that. But this is the correct URL, so our CSS is going to be pulling into the site and working perfectly fine. So we can close that, and we can come back over here. All right, so now we're going to come in here and we're going to say require once. Told you this is going to be a long video. All right, so HTML/HTML.php. That is not what we want. We want our HTML functions. HTML.php. All right, so we're going to create this folder or this file under our functions. So we're going to create new file, HTML.php. We're going to save that. We're going to save this file. All right, over here in the HTML.php, we're going to open this up. All right, and you could call this frontend.php, backend.php, so that you separate the functions for HTML on the backend and all that stuff. But we're going to keep it simple, and just any HTML that we're going to output is going to be coming from a functions file from here, but then the HTML files are going to be under the HTML folder. All right, so we're going to create a function, if I spell it right, function Idea Pro display GDPR. All right. Okay, so here we're going to do an OB start, and I've done a video on this before, so that you guys can see that video that explains what OB start is. And then we're going to say contents is equal to OB get contents. All right, and then here we're going to echo the contents so that we can include all the HTML in one file and include it here, and I'll show you how to do that in just a second. But first we want to do a OB end clean. All right, and what that does is it flushes the OB start contents. All right, so above this we're going to call in the include, and this is where we're going to say plugin directory path, and we're going to go back to the, whoops, I don't want two quotes in there. We're going to go back to the directory, and we're going to say HTML, and here we're going to put in the GDPR, let's call it GDPR display.html. PHP, let's do PHP. So, all right, so save that. We're going to copy this, whoops, come on. All right, we're going to come over to our HTML folder, and we're going to say new file, and we're going to paste that in there. And so now we have, under our HTML, we have the GDPR display. Okay, so we're going to say welcome. Okay, all right, so now to get that content to display on our page, we're going to do an add action, and it's going to be a WP footer, and then our callback, which is this here, and save. Okay, and so if we come over to our page and we refresh the page, and we scroll down here, now we've got welcome down here at the bottom of the page. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to make this a box that floats over on the right hand side over here so that it pops up and says, hey, you need to select this GDPR. All right. So now this function is done. We don't have to do anything else to this. We can close this and we're ready to go. So now here on our HTML page, we can build this out to do whatever we want. All right. So we're gonna open a div, and we're gonna say GDPR container, and you could call that IdeaPro_GDPR container or whatever you wanted as your prefix that you want to, because you want to keep those CSS files separate, right? So in here, we're going to say, we're just going to put in right now, welcome to the GDPR container, right? So now we save that, we come over here and we refresh. Now we've got this welcome to the GDPR container. And if you notice, it's white because in our CSS GDPR style, we have GDPR container and the background color is white. All right. So, and that's what color we want it to be. All right. So now inside of this, we're going to put in some more stuff that kind of separates it. All right. So we're going to create a div and we're going to say GDPR content. Let's say text content. And inside of here, we're going to do a paragraph tag and we're going to say, we use cookies to make your experience with this site better. All right, so then we're going to take this out, and that's not what our final GDPR thing is going to do. We're going to actually make a place in the back end of the site that you can update that information. All right. So then we're going to come here and we're going to create another div, and this is going to be our GDPR button container. And here we're going to put a button. All right. So we're going to say button, and that button is going to say accept. And again, we're going to make a thing in a little while to change that. All right, we're going to add a class is equal to GDPR button. All right, so we're going to save that. We're going to come over and we're going to refresh the page. And now we have this, we use cookies to, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. We use cookies to make your site experience better, and this big button that says accept. Now this is the styling of this button is based on the theme that we're using. And if you want to keep that way, it's a good idea because it matches the theme, right? But we can also make it whatever style that we want. All right, so now we have the GDPR text content. So we can come over to our CSS style here and we can put a GDPR text content, and then we can also do a GDPR text content paragraph tag. All right, and then we can come down and do the GDPR button container, and then we can come down here and do our GDPR button. All right, so that's basically the CSS that we need for that front end. We're going to set a few things up here. So in this container, we want the inner padding to be 2 rem. Okay, and so that's going to match whatever the theme that they're using, whatever they set that font size to. If they set the font size to 16 pixels in the body in the HTML, 2 rem is going to be 32 as the padding. So we're going to save that. We're going to come over here and we're going to refresh, and there we go. So now our padding gives us a little bit of padding around there. All right, and so then our paragraph tags here, we're going to set padding as to rim. Come on, there we go. So now we have a little bit of padding around here. We're going to set this to text align center. And on the paragraph tags, we can, or up here on the GDPR text content, text align center. Okay, we're going to save that, we'll come over here and refresh, and now everything is centered. All right, so we could leave this like this, change the padding, you know, maybe to 1 rim on the container itself. And, you know, then, so that sets that up. We could change the padding on here to 0.5 rim. Come over and refresh. And so now we just have this at the bottom of the page that pops up, right? So now this GDPR container up here, we want to say position fixed, and the bottom 0. Okay, we're going to come over here and we're going to refresh the page. So now we've set this fixed 0, and so now we have our GDPR that shows up in the bottom left corner of the page, no matter where you are on the page. All right, so then we want to set a max width of 400 pixels. You can set that to whatever you want. So now we have this cute little box over here that says we use cookies to make your experience with this site better. And there's an accept button. Of course, accept button, it doesn't do anything yet. So that's simply as easy as it is to kind of make the HTML and stuff like that. Now you could add some shadowing behind it to make it look better, rounded corners and stuff like that, but I'm not going to get too big into the CSS style of this. All right, so one thing we do want to do is we want to make the font size, and we're going to make it 0.8 rim, 0.8 rim. That way we make the font size just a little bit smaller. That is too small, 0.9 rim. I think that looks a little bit better. And again, this button is really big because of the style that we're using. And all right, so now we have this down here in the bottom, but it's in the bottom left and we want to make it in the bottom right. So by doing that, we can come up here and we can say right 0. Come back over here and refresh. Now we have it in the bottom right. Now we need to go into the settings and create settings for all of this. All right. So we're going to come back over here to our functions, or our main page, and we're going to say require once. And we're going to say functions settings.php. And we're going to save new file and functions.php. All right, save. We're going to open up some PHP brackets. Now, what this is going to do is we're going to create a page. We're going to register a page for the settings of the site. Okay, so we're going to create a function, and that function is going to be IdeaPro GDPR settings register. All right. And so then under here, we're going to do an add action, and that is going to be admin menu. And the second one is going to be our callback here. There we go. And so then inside of here, we're going to say add options page. And did not mean to do that. Let's do, all right. So this first argument is what we're going to call the actual page. And that's going to be our GDPR settings, right? And then the second one is going to be our, what shows up on the menu on the side. So GDPR options or settings. We could just as easily call it GDPR. So then this third column here is going to be who has access to that. And so if we put this as manage options, the only people that have access to it are administrators, all right? So then the next one is going to be our slug for this settings page. So we're going to say GDPR settings, and we could do Idea Pro up here at the first, just to make sure that it doesn't conflict with anything else. And then this next one, or the last one, is going to be our callback function that displays the information for that page. All right, so we're going to say Idea Pro GDPR settings page. Okay, now we're going to copy this, and we're going to come down here, and we're going to say function, and use that we used here in the last column, and open that up, and that is our function. So if we say echo hello world, save that, come back over to our dashboard here, dashboard, kind of to refresh it, go down to our settings and look in the settings. We have this new menu option here, GDPR settings. Click that, and now up here it says hello world. Okay, so the default div that you want to use is the wrap div. So if we wrap this in a div and we use the class wrap and save, and we come over here, see how close this hello world is to the top of the page? If we now refresh, now it kind of pulls it down a little bit. So now it's not up there against the top. So that default is wrap. And so then we could put in here, we could do an H2 GDPR. Wow, why am I having some trouble with that? Settings. So then we save, we come back over here and we refresh. Now we have this, which looks standard to the any settings page that you go to in your WordPress admin. It says GDPR. Now, what we want to do is we don't want to put any of the HTML type stuff in here. We want to call in HTML page that we can update that information. So to do that, we're going to say include, and we're going to say plugin directory path __ dir __ dot, and then we're going to say HTML, and this is going to be our settings page.php. All right, so we're going to copy this, we're going to come over to HTML, and we're going to create a new file that's going to be our settings page.php. All right, and then if we say hello world from our HTML settings page, save that, come over here and refresh. So now we have hello world from our HTML settings page. So now here on this HTML page, we can do our div wrap, and then we can create an H2 that says GDPR settings. And we come over here and refresh, and there is our settings. All right, so then now we have that page set up, and it's in our HTML. So any HTML that we need to change, whether it's the front end or the back end, is under HTML here. Close that CSS. So it's under the folder HTML. Our CSS is under the HTML CSS folder, one for backend and one for the front end, which is the GDPR style. And we haven't created a JavaScript file yet, but we are going to in just a minute. All right. So the first setting that we want to put in here is we want to create a label, and that label is going to be called GDPR text. That's as easy as it's going to be. And so in here, we're going to put in a text area, and the name of that is going to be our GDPR text, and ID is going to be GDPR text. Don't really have to put an ID in there, but that's fine. Let's see what this does without any columns in there at all. See if WordPress automatically kind of puts that in, and it's very small. All right, so we could separate this in a div. Let's put columns back in there. Oops, I accidentally closed my file structure there. So that makes it a little bit bigger. We could put a break after this. We could go into our backend CSS and start creating some stuff here. All right, so let's do a class, and this is GDPR Idea Pro. Let's do Idea Pro underscore GDPR. All right, so this is in our wrap here. So now if we go into our backend and we say Idea Pro GDPR, and then anything after that will pull in labels and all that stuff. So we're going to do label, and this is going to be display block. Okay, so now that we do that, come over here and we refresh. Now it puts the container underneath. All right, so now we can do the same thing, Idea Pro GDPR, and we can say text area, and we can say width is 100%. Don't need two of those. Height is 80 pixels. That should be good. We save that, we come over here and we refresh. Now we've got this full box going all the way across. And in the label up here, we could say font weight, font weight is 700. Font size is 1.4 rem. Let's do a margin 0.000. Let's do 1 rem on top, 0.3 rem underneath the label. So let's refresh. So that's a little big on the font size. Let's go to 1.2. How about that? Save. It's still kind of big, isn't it? 0.1. Maybe with a font of 700, we need just 1 rem. Yeah, that looks fine. We can leave that alone. It's a little big for what we're doing, but that's fine. So GDPR text, this is going to be the information that we put in there. All right, so now currently we use cookies to make this site better. Let's copy that. Let's come over here, and actually we need to make a form and all that kind of stuff. So let's create this as a form. We don't need to go all the way up there. Let's do the form right here. Form, and the form action. Okay, so action, we don't really need to send it anywhere. We're going to do a method. Method is equal to post. All right, so then we're going to come down here and we're going to put a input. Type is equal to submit. Name is equal to, not namespace, name is equal to save GDPR settings, and value, value is equal to save settings. Let's do GDPR settings. All right, and then we're going to put a class on this button as class button hyphen primary. There we go. We're going to save that. We're going to come over here and we're going to look, and now we have a button. All right, so if we put this kind of in a div, and we say class button container, save that. We're going to come over here to backend, and we're going to say this. So that button container is padding. Let's just do padding 0.000, and the padding on top is going to be to rim, and the padding on the bottom is going to be to rim. Why not? And we could shorten that with shorthand CSS, but that's fine. All right, so now it just gives us a little bit of space there between that. All right, so now we can go back over to our settings page here, and we can say where we're going to send this and save that information. So you could do it right here on the page to make it simple. I think that's what we're going to do just to make it a little bit easier. We're going to come up right below here, and we're going to open up some PHP tags. Now you could make this submit to another page where it comes back and all that stuff, but we're just going to do it right here. If is set, wow, what was that? Is set. I told you guys this video was going to be long, and it's getting really, really long. $_post, and then we're going to look for our save settings name here as our button. If save settings is post, now we're going to save the information that we're submitting. So GDPR text, we're going to do update option, and the name of it is going to be the GDPR text, and then we're going to look for the post GDPR text. Now what this does is this creates an option or creates a row in the options table called GDPR text, and we could call that Idea Pro GDPR text if we wanted to. Now you could use add option, but if you use update option, it's going to continue to update that one row. If you use add option, it will continue to add options off of the same name, and you're going to have multiples in the database. All right. So then that's going to tell us that the GDPR information has been saved. Now, WordPress has a thing that whenever you update an option, let's go in here and let's update permalinks. See how this shows green permalinks, permalinks has been updated. If we copy this HTML, copy this, and we come in here and we edit this HTML, highlight it, copy it, we're going to close this. We can come over here, and once that information is updated, we can paste in this HTML here, and that creates the notification for us that shows that the information has been updated. All right, so let's change this information. So we've got settings error, settings updated, notice success is dismissible, permalink structure updated. So we want to say GDPR settings have been updated, right? And so that's all we have to change. The rest of this is all done for us. All right, so if we save that, we come over here back to our GDPR settings, and we hit that. Now we have GDPR settings have been updated. All right, so let's go in here and put in a placeholder for our text area, GDPR front end text. All right, so we'll save that. All right, so now let's go over, copy this, copy what we already put in here, paste it in here. Let's refresh the page just to make sure we have a clean slate here. We're going to paste that information in here and hit save. All right, so now this is blank because we're not looking for that information here. So right up here, we can say the GDPR text, let's use that as our variable name, is equal to get option. And we're going to put in this Idea Pro GDPR text, and it can be blank, right? So now in between our text areas here, we can say echo GDPR text. All right, and so now we refresh this page. Now we have that text that we saved. So if we do ... update settings. Now it's updated. All right, so now on the front end of our site, we need to, where are we at here? Look for the HTML for display. Here we are. All right, so now we want to replace this with our options. So we can do some PHP brackets, echo get option idea pro GDPD text, blah, blah, blah. And then we can set a default in here if we wanted to, so that if those settings haven't been updated yet, it will automatically show something, right? So we're going to copy this text that we used before and save that, all right? And then we're going to come over here and we're going to refresh. And now we have this new text that we entered with all the extra dots in there, right? So we could say we use cookies and make it bigger, right? To make your experience better. So then we come back over here and we refresh, and now we use cookies to make this, you know. And so you could put in, you know, a break here, you know, you could put in some HTML if you wanted to. You could actually even make this and then we come back over. Why did I hit save? I want to save that. There we go. So you come over here and refresh, and now we have some breaks in there. We could actually make our settings box here a WordPress editor, the old style editor box if we wanted to. But I want to keep it simple. I want to just use a text area thing here to make this simple for right now. If we want to expand on this later on, we can. It's going to be a long enough plugin or a long enough video as it is. So next thing we need to do is we need to say what we're going to do with this accept button. So we've got our settings page. We're going to come over here and we're going to create a new label, button text. And you could do here, you could put in your for there, and then you could say GDPR, let's do GDPR, GDPR. I'm having trouble with that. Button text, all right? And so then here, we're gonna put an input, and it's just a text. Name is equal to, not namespace, GDPR, there we go. Button text. Value is equal to nothing right now. We're going to put a placeholder of GDPR button text. Now we're going to use a CSS class that WordPress already does called widefat, which is going to make it all the way across, but that's fine. We don't really care. All right, so this is our GDPR button text, and it goes all the way across. We could make it shorter if we wanted to, but I'm not worried about that right now. So let's get into saving this. So GDPR button text, we're going to come up here and we're going to copy this and say button text and button text. So now we can come down here, copy this and say button text and GDPR button text. That did not work like I wanted to. There we go. So now this GDPR button text is going to be our value. So inside of here, we're going to put in, open up some PHP tags and echo GDPR button text, but we need a $sign in front of that. All right. So GDPR button text. So we come back over here and we're going to say I accept, just so you guys can see that it's different. All right. So now that is saved into the database. So now we can come back over here on our display.gdpr and we can say echo get option, and we're going to get that same option, the GDPR button text, and here we can do a default of accept, right? And so we can come back over here and refresh, and now it says I accept. Right? So let's say that we didn't have anything set yet. So let's do a button text 1, right? Let's say that was the value that we're getting from the database. If we come back over here and we refresh, now it just says accept. It uses this default here that we put in. So same thing up here. If we put a 1 after this, you know, and come back over here and we refresh, Now it says we use cookies to make your experience with this site better. Accept. But that way, if no one has saved anything into the settings page, it will default to this, right? So we save that, come back over here and refresh. Now it says we use cookies to make your experience, and it works off of the settings from in here in the database. What we're going to do is we're going to create a JS file, and that new file is going to be GDPR.js. All right, and so we need to come up here and create a new functions file called js.php. All right, and inside of this function file, we need to open up some brackets, and we need to do kind of the same thing that we did with our CSS here, where we did a backend, a front end in queue. So we're going to copy this function here, and we're going to come over to our JS, and we're going to paste that in, and we're just going to change this to JS. We're going to change our callback function to JS here, and we're going to put in the WP foot. All right, so now we need to change this to our JavaScript file. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to say WP in queue. I guess I could have left that there. In queue script, and this name is going to be our Idea Pro Frontend GDPR. We could leave it that same thing, and then the HTML, CS, JS, and then our JS file is going to be GDPR.js. We're going to come over here to our page, and we're going to refresh. Let's look at the page source, and then we're going to do a search for GDPR.js. Is that what I called it? GDPR.js. GDPR.js, and it's not found. Okay, so we're going to come back over to our main page here, and we need to bring in the require once, and that's going to be functions slash js.php. All right, then we come over here and we can check for our GDPR.js. There we go. Now we have it in there. So our script here. All right, and then if we click on this, opens up and it says nothing here. So we have in queue something wrong, or we didn't call it right. GDPR.js. Plugin directory HTML JS. Did we not save this? Save. There we go. Now we've saved it. All right. So now we have our GDPR.js file in there. So now we can say, now we can start building out the JS. All right. So what we're going to do here is now we're going to use jQuery to load the page load a PHP page once they click the button. So we're going to say $dot, and let's do a, where's our display? GDPR display. I'm going to bring this over here, and I'm going to bring our GDPR.js over here. All right, so now we need to put an ID for this button. ID is equal to GDPR accept. All right, so we're going to save that. We're going to come over here and we're going to put a # in there, or hashtag GDPR.on, and we're going to say click touch start, and that's going to be a function. So e.prevent default default. I think that's the right function that we're looking for. Prevent default. Okay, e.prevent default. So let's see if we get an error from that, because all right, let's get rid of that. Let's open up this. Boom. Let's open up the console. So $ is not defined. All right, so if we see this $ is not defined, we need jQuery also in our JS. So we can pull in, let's make another one of these. Whoops, why did I delete that? That didn't want to be deleted. All right, so now we're going to go over to Google and do a jQuery hosted. And we're going to go to hosted libraries, and we're going to go down to jQuery, and we're going to get jQuery 3. We're going to actually just get this name here. And so we can come back over here, come back over to our thing here, and paste that in. And that's going to be the Google, let's say Google hosted jQuery. All right, so now we have that, GDPR. So now we can say alert. Let's just make sure this button's working. Hello button is working. All right, so now our button, if we click that, it says hello button is working. So we know that button now is working. All right, so our jQuery is working. Okay, so instead of alerting here, we're going to now do some AJAX to call in a PHP page. Told you guys this was going to be a long video. All right, so we're going to say $.ajax. Okay, and then inside of here, we're going to open up some curly brackets, and our URL is going to be accept.php. And we're going to get the success. We need a, after that, success function data. Let's put data in there. Function data. And inside of here is where we're going to put in the remove box when selected. Okay. All right, so that's just a comment we're going to put in there. All right, so then our box is going to be the, if we go back to our display, we can put an ID in here. ID is equal to GDPR accept GDPR container. I mean, we could literally just call it the same thing as the class. So GDPR container. We could even use the class .GDPR container, but we're going to use that, and we're going to say .remove. Okay, and so now we need to create a page for this function. But first, what we're going to do is we're going to call in the URL for our page. And the way we're going to do that is in our display, we're going to put right here data URL is equal to, and since this is a PHP page, we can say PHP echo plugin directory URL, and this is going to be underscore underscore directory underscore underscore and dot. Actually, we can put it after this. So we're going to go to, we're going to put it in the root. So we're just going to say accept.php. Okay. All right. So in the root of the complete folder here, right here, we're going to say new file. It's going to be accept.php. What did I call it over here? Oh, I did call it accept.php. Okay, so save that. And what we're going to do is we're going to get the data URL, var data URL is equal to display HTML data URL dot data URL. All right, so then if we do this, we do console.log and we look at the, let's comment this out just for a minute. Oh, we have so many comments on there. We're going to get an error, but let's just do this. Data URL to make sure that it's pulling that in. Data URL. All right, so if we come back over to our page and we refresh the page, we look at the console, inspect, and we hit accept. Unexpected token, so we're getting too many errors right here. So let's take this out for just a minute. Save, come back over here and refresh. Accept. There we go. Now it gives us this URL of GDPR plugin accept.php. So that's where we're going to be submitting the information to. All right. So then we're going to post this back in there. And so this URL is going to be the data URL. All right. That's where we're getting an error. Our square brackets should not be square brackets. They should be function. There we go. All right. So now that's going to submit to that page. All right. We can take this out, save, come back over to our page, refresh. All right. So now if we accept, now it's going to run that page. It says GDPR.io accept.php. There's a 404 error. So let's go to accept, save. Let's try it again. Oops, come on. Try it again, and there we go. Now our box removed and our page, our PHP page loaded here, accept. All right, so now we're going to open up some PHP brackets on this PHP page here, and we are going to do a require once, which is the WP load. So we're going to say WP load. Idea Pro WP load. Come on, where is my WP load? There we go. So require once, explode WP content, file 0, WP load. So basically what that is doing is it's bringing in the WP load from WordPress to make sure that this page loads. All right. So we have this in there. So now we can say we're going to do a set cookie. All right. And so what this is it says expire, and it's going to be basically this gives us 6 months. So 6 times 30 times 24 times 3600. So 3600 is seconds, hours, days times 6, right? So basically that number gives us 6 months. And then in here, we're going to say GDPR accept. And this is where we're going to say, user ID. So current user ID, we're not going to worry about that. We're going to say just yes. And the time expire, which is 6 months. And then the slash here is for the entire site. So now if we go back over to our page and we refresh the page, we say I accept, and now that cookie is now installed on our page so that if we reloaded, it shouldn't come back up, but it's going to right now because we haven't told it to not if the cookie's there. All right, refresh, it's going to show up. Okay, so now we can come back over here to our HTML page, our functions HTML page, and we can look at if the cookie's set, don't show the page. All right, if is set, and we're going to do a $_cookie, and that cookie is going to be, whoops, I didn't mean to paste that. Where did we set our cookie? Here we go. Oh, accept right here. So GDPR accept. So if cookie GDPR accept, don't do anything else. And then we can put all of this inside of here. Include contents and echo out the contents. All right, so now we have nothing. If the cookie's set, that doesn't do anything at all. Else it shows all the content. All right, so now if we come back over here to our page and we refresh, now that's gone. It's not going to pop up because every time we refresh the page, any page that we go to, it's going to not pop up because it says, oh, you have the cookies. Now, if we remove the cookies, or if we open a new private window and we go to, it's going to pop up here because the private window doesn't see our cookies. So if we hit accept here and then go to other pages, now it doesn't show up anymore because that private window now has that cookie saved. Of course, if you close the private window and you open a new private window and go to ideapro.io again, come on, ideapro.io, it's going to pop up because once you close a private window, it will remove the cookies from there. So, all right, so let's close that and close that. All right, so now we have our JavaScript working so that it doesn't show up anymore, and we've clicked it and it's gone. So now what we need to do is on this PHP page, we need to say that we want to accept that information and put it in the database. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to insert the user information into the database. All right, so we're going to create a variable called insert and do WordPress DB get results. Again, I like to use that just as an example. So, and then in here, we're going to say insert into, and we're going to call in our table, right? So we can say dot dot WordPress DB prefix, and then our table, if we go back to the original file here, our table was just called GDPR. All right, and we could put this into a constant up here that would show that table name, but we're only using it like in 2 places, maybe 3 eventually. So GDPR, insert into that, and then we're going to open up some parentheses, values, and some more parentheses. And inside of here, if we go back and look at our table, ID, IP address. So the ID we don't need to fill in. We do need to put in IP address, and we need to put in the user ID, and we need to do the date. All right, so here we're going to pull in the user IP address. So let's come up here and let's say $IP address is equal to $_server. And we're going to say remote ADDR. All right. So the IP address is going to come down, and we're going to do two little single quotes, two solid double quotes, two dots, and then IP address. And then we're going to do a comma, and the user ID is going to be $user ID. All right. So to get that, we're going to come up here and we're going to say if is set $current _ user ID $user ID is equal to, and we're going to say current user ID. All right. Else we're going to say user ID is equal to 0. Okay, so now we have the user ID, and then last we have the date. So we're going to say dot and we're going to say date, and then up here we're going to say $date is equal to date, and we wanted capital Y. I had to think about it. M-D H-I-S. That is our date that we want. All right. So now we have date in there, and we can save that. And let's come over to our page. Let's go to a browser window, a private window, ideapro.io, and hit I accept. And then we can come back over to our database. There we go. And now we can click this, and now we have a row in here that is the ID 1 IP address, 0 is the user, and then we have the date here. So now what we want to do is we want to come over to our, let's get rid of that, settings page here. So we're going to go to settings. We're going to do GDPR settings here. Now under here, I want to build a place that shows all the people that have accepted the GDPR setting. So let's go back over to the settings page, which if we look, here is our settings page. So under here we have the button container, and then we have our form here. So right here, what I want to do is I want to create a table of data that of the GDPR people that have come into, right? So let's open some PHP tags, because first we want to get that data. So we're going to say get, and that's going to be wp-db get results, and we're going to say select star from, and this is going to be WordPress DB prefix, and our table name is GDPR, order by ID DESC. And so what that's doing is we're going to get all the rows from our GDPR table. We're going to order it by that first column, which is the ID column, and we're going to order it DESC, which is descending, meaning the last person that's accepted is going to be at the top. And you could change it to ASC if you wanted, so that the newest person or the oldest person's at the top, but we want to do DESC descending because we want the oldest person, the newest person that has done it at the top. So we're going to just show this array really quick of the people that have signed up. Now we have the two columns or the two rows from the database. All right. So now we're going to do a for each. Actually, let's do this. Let's close this off. Let's come down here and let's create a table. And let's do the t-head is equal to tr, and then th ID. The next column is going to be the IP address. The next column is going to be the user ID, and then the next column is going to be the date that they signed up or they accepted it. All right, and so we can call that date. All right, so then we can come down here and do a T body, TR. Actually, we're going to do open brackets here. We're going to do a for each, and we're going to loop through all of this information. So for each $get as $key $value, and we have an extra hyphen in there. All right, so here we can close PHP, open it back up at the bottom, and here we can do a TR. TD is ID, IP, user, and date. All right, so now we can replace these with the PHP information we need. All right, so PHP echo $V ID, and then the IP address is echo $V, and it is IP address like this, IP address, and then the user is echo $V user ID, I think. Yeah, user ID. And then the date is echo $V date, like that. All right. So we'll come back over here and refresh. So now we have a table that has no styling to it, but it says ID1, ID2, the IP address, and the date. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope this helps you. I will put a link to the file in the description, but it's going to have some requirements because I don't want to just build a plugin for you guys that you guys take and use. My channel, I want to teach you guys how to develop and how to do this stuff so that you can build your own. And if you're just downloading the file and using it, you're not really learning what each thing does. So I'll put the file down in the description, and when you click on it, it'll tell you what you need to do to download that file. So thank you guys for watching. I really enjoy making these videos. Please subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next tutorial. Thanks.